Myanmar, also known as Burma, a land with such a deep history, often called the Golden Land.
That's right.
And the material you've shared really gives us a fascinating journey through its past and present, a real chance to understand the complexities.
Definitely. And our goal today, as I see it, is to navigate these sources, pull out the most, compelling insights for you, the listener.
Exactly. The range you provided, history, politics, economics, culture, it's a great foundation for, well, a comprehensive understanding.
It really is.
So we want to explore those key historical moments, its unique geography in Southeast Asia, how its political systems evolved.
Culture, the challenges facing now?
Right. And do it in a way that's, engaging. We want to connect the dots so you get those real aha moments.
Sounds like a plan. Where should we start?
Let's start with the ground itself, the geography.
Okay. Well, what immediately jumps out is Myanmar's size. It's the largest country in mainland Southeast Asia.
And its location is so strategic, isn't it? Bordering Thailand, Laos, China, India, plus the Andaman Sea.
Absolutely. It's historically been this kind of bridge between East and West that's shaped trade, culture, everything for centuries.
And the landscapes are incredibly diverse. You've got the mountains up north, the hill tribes.
And the Central Plains, the Rice Bowl, really. And unique spots like in the lake, plus all the colonial leftovers.
Real contrasts, yeah.
And the rivers, they're fundamental. The Irrawaddy, Chindwin, Satang, Thinelwin.
Crucial arteries for transport, irrigation.
And potential hydropower, too. But you have to remember they change dramatically with the seasons.
Ah, right. Flooding in the wet season, then shrinking and silting up in the dry season. Big implications for, well, everything.
Exactly. Which brings us to the monsoon seasons.
Yeah, those 3 distinct seasons you mentioned.
Yeah.
Hot summer, March to May.
Then the heavy rains, June, July through October, roughly.
And finally, the cooler winter, November to February. You can see how that rhythm would just dominate agriculture and economic life.
Totally. The rains are vital, obviously, but also bring challenges, transport, infrastructure. And managing the rivers through those cycles, that's complex.
And Yangon, its history is fascinating, too, starting as a trading settlement way back.
6th century, yeah, where the rivers met. It's grown massively, but you still see the colonial architecture and, of course, the Shwedagon Pagoda.
An incredible symbol, a living piece of that long history.
Ah.
Okay, so let's journey further back now. Early civilizations. The sources point to some really sophisticated societies.
There's evidence in Upper Burma, like from the Shmasatnamanath Pagoda, suggesting something pretty advanced as early as, 752 AD?
Wow. And even earlier, that ancient town Wathali near Babamo.
Yep.
Stuff they found there in the 19th century.
Terracotta figures, coins, inscriptions. It points to a major center.
And the potential link to Ceylon's Golden Age and King Kirtivarman in the 5th century, conquering Cambodia and Bamo. It really shows how connected things were back then.
It really does. And, archaeological interest in Myanmar is growing. It was kind of closed off for a long time.
Right, so now we're learning more about its role in wider Southeast Asian culture.
Exactly. New discoveries are shedding light all the time.
And we have the Peel city-states, too. Clearly important early on.
Very significant. And we absolutely have to talk about the Mon Kingdom.
Originating over in Thailand, the Varvadi civilization.
That's the one. They flourished in Lower Myanmar for 1,500 years. A huge influence on Burman culture later on.
They had their own script, literature. They adopted Theravada Buddhism early, pretty advanced.
Very. It shows you the cultural diversity that was already there. But it's also important, sadly, to note how Mon identity was suppressed later when Burman power rose again.
A recurring theme, unfortunately, in Myanmar's ethnic history. Which brings us neatly to Balgan. The sources really stress its strategic spot right at the intersection of the river corridor.
Absolutely key. That location gave it control over trade, access to resources. It shifted the whole geopolitical center towards the Irrawaddy Basin.
A major power shift. Balgan became this international hub, didn't it?
Yeah, drawing influences from India, the Islamic world. It wasn't just about trade, though. Living standards rose, social structures got more complex.
It's interesting, though, while we're talking about this powerful centralized kingdom, thinking about the 2008 Constitution.
Ah, yes. A much more recent attempt.
To establish rule of law, separation of powers, at least on paper.
Yeah.
A very different kind of structure being aimed for.
Such a stark contrast, isn't it? From those early kingdoms to modern legal frameworks.
But it all underlines Myanmar's deep foundational role in the region's history. Clear from the archaeology showing those ancient connections.
Definitely. So, shall we move forward in time to the British arrival?
Yes, a pivotal era. By the late 18th century, the King of Ava controlled much of Lower Burma.
But that expansion brought them into conflict with the British East India Company. The destruction of Pegu around then, a big Mon center, was a sign of those shifting powers.
And that story about Manipur, the Donna Hills, becoming a British tributary state, it shows British influence spreading even before the big wars.
Right, things were changing.
Then the First Anglo-Burmese War, early 19th century. Big consequences, not just for Burma.
No, Thailand was apparently very aware of the British threat, too. It shifted the whole regional power balance.
And eventually, that led from indirect rule to direct British colonial administration.
Which brought its own challenges, even though Myanmar was relatively isolated geographically. It fundamentally reshaped governance, lasting effects.
And naturally, that colonial rule fueled the struggle for independence. Nationalist feelings grew despite the repression.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how Buddhist ideas and Western political thought kind of mixed in the independence movements.
A new elite emerged. Western-style political structures started appearing.
Even some ethnic minority anti-colonial groups initially used the language of democracy.
Until independence finally came in January 1948, as a union.
But as the sources detail, that unity was immediately challenged. Ethnic minorities wanted more autonomy, form their own armies.
So the vision of a unified nation faced pressure right from the start.
And the independence leaders themselves had different visions, which, probably didn't help build stability once the common enemy, the British, was gone.
Moving into that post-independence time, they tried democracy initially.
They did, but the sources suggest it was incredibly difficult to make parliamentary democracy stick. Lots of factors involved.
Like those differing agendas you mentioned, pre-colonial power structures still lingering.
Exactly. And growing dissatisfaction among various groups with the ruling powers. That fed into a shift towards a one-party system, eventually making a military takeover seem more likely to some.
Which happened, of course, the 1962 coup, General Ne Win.
A huge turning point, the start of decades of military dictatorship. And the economy really suffered.
Yeah, the sources point to massive economic problems under military rule. Corruption, bad decisions.
Stunted growth. Any progress made earlier was pretty much wiped out. They kept wages low, which didn't help broader growth either.
And the wealth that was generated just got concentrated among the military elite.
Right.
A huge gap.
A massive disparity. It led to this period of, stagnation and isolation. You could argue it was even more pronounced than in some other post-colonial countries.
The long-term impact of that militarization.
Yeah.
Still being felt today as they try to move forward.
Absolutely. Which leads us to 1988, the 88-88 Uprising.
A really significant moment. Widespread popular resistance. Started over education issues.
Initially, yeah, but it quickly became about much more. A huge movement against the military regime after 26 years. People wanted political and economic change desperately.
Hundreds of thousands in the streets in Yangon demanding the military step down.
And the regime's response was just brutal. Martial law, violent suppression, killings.
The state media even tried to dehumanize the opposition, didn't they? Undermine the leaders.
They did. There were some promises of reform under all that pressure, but pro-democracy leaders were still silenced, arrested.
What really triggered it? Ne Win resigning played a part.
That created uncertainty, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Aung San Suu Kyi emerged as this incredibly prominent figure during that time.
But the immediate aftermath was harsh. Martial law, arrests, and then the 1990 election.
Right. The NLD, Aung San Suu Kyi's party, won by a landslide.
But the junta just refused to recognize it.
Exactly. And she was placed under house arrest for years.
She became such an icon for the democracy struggle, enduring so much.
Absolutely. That 1990 victory showed the public's will so clearly.
And then fast forward to 2015, she becomes de facto leader after those elections. Seemed like a new chapter.
It did feel hopeful. But that period also saw, intense international criticism over her silence on human rights issues.
Particularly the Rohingya crisis.
Yes. And then, the 2021 coup, she and other NLD leaders detained again.
Just a sudden, shocking end to that period of fragile progress raises huge questions about the future.
It really does.
So those recent political developments. The international pressure did lead to some reforms, culminating in the 2015 elections. A landmark moment.
Undeniably. The NLD's big win was a major shift. But some analysts, looking back, suggest the 2021 coup was maybe seen as inevitable by some within the military, given how the 2011 political settlement was structured.
And the global reaction to the coup has been strong?
Widespread condemnation, yes.
And sadly, throughout all this, human rights remain just a terrible, persistent issue. The sources detail staggering violations under military rule.
The Rohingya crisis is probably the most prominent and devastating example. It's often framed as religious conflict.
But the roots go much deeper, don't they? Political, social, economic factors.
Yeah.
And a long history of discrimination against Muslims.
Absolutely. And that 1982 citizenship law was crucial. It basically institutionalized the exclusion of the Rohingya.
Leading to displacement, horrific abuses. It shows how entrenched these problems are. International efforts often seem to struggle to address the root causes.
It's incredibly challenging.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit. Let's talk about Myanmar's cultural heritage. Despite all the turmoil, it's incredibly rich, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A long, vibrant history, and so much diversity among the different ethnic groups, their customs and traditions.
Religion, especially Buddhism, seems central to pre-colonial culture and politics.
Hugely influential. Even during the colonial era, religious networks remained important, sometimes shaping nationalist movements in interesting ways.
And the traditional arts. Just stunning. Begins, temples, and sculptures.
Incredible. And the bronze work, wood carving, stone carving, remarkable craftsmanship throughout history.
Which makes you think about tourism. It seems so tied to the political situation there.
Very much so. You see periods where it opens up, then clamps down again. It mirrors the political journey.
Popular places like Bagan, Mandalay, in the lake offer amazing experiences.
But it's complex for travelers, isn't it? There are ethical questions given the politics.
Definitely. Now, the economy. Rich in resources, but
mismanagement, especially by the elite, has been a huge problem. That's a key theme in the sources.
traditional agriculture, rice, hasn't performed as well as it could. And there's a big informal economy.
Right. And state-owned enterprises, businesses connected to the military or cronies, have dominated. That stifles broader, more equitable growth.
Plus, they face environmental challenges affecting the economy too. Rainfall variability, cyclones.
Yeah, Cyclone Nargis was devastating. And deforestation is a major issue for agriculture and overall stability.
So looking ahead, the future prospects seem really tied to political stability, don't they?
Inextricably linked. The ongoing conflicts with ethnic groups are a massive hurdle.
And economically. Potential is there if stability comes and resources are managed better.
But right now, trade relationships are limited. Forming free trade agreements is tough. Big economic challenges remain.
So wrapping this all up, this deep dive really shows a nation of, well, incredible contrasts.
Absolutely. From the Golden Land beginnings, the Great Kingdom.
For colonialism, the independence struggle, decades of military rule, the ongoing fight for democracy and human rights. It's just so complex.
And that rich culture, the diverse geography, standing against this backdrop of political and economic struggle.
It really is a compelling, multi-layered story.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, the listener. Considering this long, tangled history, the cultural highs, the deep conflicts, what single factor do you think will be most critical for Myanmar's future?
Is it political reform? Or maybe economic development that actually reaches everyone?
Or perhaps genuine national reconciliation between all the ethnic groups? Or could it be the influence of outside countries?
It really feels like a nation always at a crossroads. Understanding the past, as we've tried to do today, seems absolutely vital to even contemplating its future.